There is a special type of wizards. They use words to create words. They make us travel without moving our feet, only by using our imagination. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tell Me About. Today, we're having with us a beautiful mind, a young talent. Please welcome Mr. Hamza Qudri.
Thank you so much for the invite, Yassine.
The pleasure is mine. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Welcome to Channel 7.
Thank you so much.
So, you're a wrong writer. Tell us more about you. The audience wants to discover you.
Sure. I think I describe myself as an aspiring author, as in I'm trying to get my first novel published. I am especially interested in historical fiction. And so what really attracts me about historical fiction is the fact that, we're able to tell parts of our histories that are not necessarily well known to the world. But we like to tell those stories through the impact on human beings and the social life. And I really like exploring how individuals interact with those social events and historical events and are able to navigate a life through all of those.
All right. So you have an MA in English literature and civilization.
Correct.
And what inspires you the most?
I think I'm really drawn to untold stories in the past. And so especially if I see a part of a history that has not been explored, I think Algeria is really rich with a lot of potential in terms of stories that haven't really traveled to the rest of the world.
Especially and we have an endless amount of stories.
Exactly, yeah. And I think what's really fascinating about it is, like I said, the impact of that on human life and how individuals interact with those stories and with those events in history and how it impacts our lives. And so I am really drawn into that, and I'm always thinking of ways to tell those stories in a way that's also fascinating and entertaining for readers.
And also how our stories inspire stories around the world, characters around the world. For example, the fictional character Ras Al Ghul in DC Comics, in fact, it's Ras Al Ghul in Arabic, and his origins are from North Africa, from North African stories.
Yeah, indeed, and I feel like there is a lot of interest, I think, recently in authentic voices and people telling stories from their own communities around the world, and I think that's really a good opportunity, especially for maybe Algerian writers, but also from the North Africa, like I said, to write about what they see in their daily life, or from their own community, culture, and history. Because I feel like, especially now with with the shift towards English, there is a little bit more opportunities to open up our stories in the world. And I think in the past, between Arabic and French, yes, there was a lot of that reach, but I feel like with English, it sort of expands it to other parts of the world.
We have better chances to expand our stories to the world.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and then you worked as an education and international development since 2008.
Yeah, so
How did you handle the transition from English civilization and literature to education?
Well, I think it's easier than it sounds, because I started, as I was still in college, I started teaching English, and then I started to get really interested in education and teaching in general. And that got me a job with an international NGO to work on education and young youth development, or workforce development. And so that got me more into sort of project management and what we call international development. And so that has been my career for the last 14 years.
And as a director of programs at World Learning, you oversee a portfolio of education and workforce development here in Algeria.
So, correct. As as of last month, I just changed to the British Council. But before then, I spent 10 years working with World Learning as the director of programs for the last 3 years. But throughout the 10 years, I think I had the pleasure to interact with a lot of schools and institutions, but also a lot of youth. A lot of it is helping, institutions provide better education services, but also helping youth develop the skills that they need for the job market. And then recently, I joined the British Council as country director, where I'm also excited to join a new team working on different programs, but also similar in education and cultural exchange.
And you also created and led programs for youth and educators in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa.
Correct. So I think one thing I really enjoy, and I think it's also in line with the whole writing passion, is I really enjoy creating and implementing sort of like training curricula. And so I did that with a number of organizations, like especially in Iraq, but also in other parts of the MENA region, especially Saudi Arabia.
And beyond the MENA region.
Yeah, I worked also I think I worked with university professors in the United States to sort of create a mentorship program for youth. Also in Korea, we worked with teachers.
Penn State University in USA.
Exactly, yeah. I spent a year at Penn State working. I was both studying but also working with a group of university professors to work on youth workforce development programs.
And also in Korea.
In Korea, yeah. I worked with teachers in South Korea.
It's really different. So did you try to tell them more about the Algerian culture, the Algerian stories?
Yeah, I think there is always a lot of interest, especially I feel like, whether in the US or also in South Korea, there is not a lot of Algerians or there's not a lot of sort of culture, the Algerian culture traveling there. And so there's definitely a lot of interest in, where do you come from? What is your life like? And so I think, there's always opportunities to tell some of those stories and then also create long-lasting connections.
Connections, yes.
So you can tell, especially now with social media, then they can really observe and see more of sort of your country and what you do.
And also, in addition to writing, you're reading lover. You love reading fictional history stories.
Correct.
For example?
Yeah, I think my favorite historical novelist is Ken Follett. He really writes I think, a lot of really interesting stories around, for example, the 1400s, the 1500s, and there's always a historical event, and then there is the people around that and how they're impacted by something sometimes very simple as, like the building of a bridge or something a little bit more impactful. But also he tells a lot of stories about World War I, World War II, the Cold War. So some of his historical fiction, there is a trilogy that's, I think it's called the Kingsbridge trilogy. And there's books like Pillars of the Earth. He's got a lot of also novels around World War II, in Egypt and other places in the world.
Great. Yeah. First story that comes to my mind when I hear fictional history, it's الحريق, Mohammed Deeb.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fiction, but with a lot of reality.
And I feel like that's the beauty of historical fiction. It's not all imagination. I feel like, the setting is real. These are stories that could have happened. Maybe they happened.
Or maybe they happened.
Maybe they happened, yeah.
Exactly. And you also wrote short stories and novels. Well, tell us more. So
I think this has been my passion since I was a kid, but I feel like I never really tried to publish. So
you discovered your passion for writing when you were a kid.
I think for stories in general, I think as a kid, as I was playing, with little animals and figurines, I would always be spinning sort of stories and scenes. And then, as I started writing, I would just put pieces of paper and write a story. And then I was always imitating stories that I was watching or reading. And then I feel like I did that all throughout my youth up until university. And then, with work, I think I got a little bit busy. But around 2015, I really wanted to go back to my passion in writing. And then I started writing in English at the time. I had the chance to really work with really great writers and, published writers. When I was at Penn State, I took a fictional creative writing class with the published author, and so that was really very good at sparking my passion again. And so I was able to write short stories more in English, and then also that's actually when I started writing Sand Roses, my novel.
Your novel, your book, Sand Roses, it's unpublished yet.
Yes, and we're hoping to get it published in the middle of next year, 2023.
2023.
Yeah.
So tell us more about this story. Story happens in Busada.
Correct. And so Busada, I think...
the early 30s.
Yeah, between 1931 and 1934. And so really, that was a very fascinating story for me to know about because I accidentally stumbled on this podcast that talked about Busada and then mentioned sort of the red nail dancers. and I had always heard about the red nail, but I never heard about the whole culture. That these women we know would travel from villages to come work as dancers in Busada, and they attracted tourists from around the world at the time. And then they would collect a lot of money for the dowry to go back and get married and start a house.
Yes.
But also they trained the young girls from young age to work as dancers. But also there was a lot of clashes between the dancers, especially the French army at the time,
Yes.
Who struggled to understand the whole culture. And so there was a lot of
The horrors of colonialism.
yeah, there is that. And so, in a way, Busada used to be called La Ville de Joie, the city of joy.
Yes.
But also for these dancers, it was a city of horror.
For foreigner tourists, it was like wonderful for them.
Exactly. But for the locals, it was a city of horrors. And so
it was a nightmare for them.
Definitely that, and there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of killings. For young single women who are on their own, it's even more dangerous for them because.
Yes.
And then also there's this whole thing about they used to wear all of their belongings on them. So the jewelry is all on them, and so it makes them an easy and attractive target. So anybody who wants to steal their money, they would attack them, and they had to develop the self-defense techniques. They had to have the bracelet with sort of studs that they can attack their attacker. And all of that really fascinated me and, sort of like inspired me to write a novel about, these two young sisters who go to Busada. They are full of dreams to be successful dancers. They want to travel the world, like, with Cirque Ammar, because that was a thing, or with a painter like Etienne Dini at the time was a painter.
Yes. Who became Nasruddin Dine.
Exactly. And so for them, it was, the Busada was a city where their dreams would come true. But then they soon realized that this is also a city full of horrors. And so as they start to make their way, they try to sort of navigate their way, they accidentally kill a French soldier in self-defense. And so that gets them in more and more trouble as they try to hide the crime until they go head-to-head against the French colonel. And they find themselves at the heart of like a civilizational clash, which I really enjoyed exploring.
So there is self-defense, a French soldier murdered. And what happens next? Without spoilers.
Yeah, so we open up the novel with one of the sisters accidentally killing a French soldier, and of course they can't go to the police. They can't tell anyone because then they would definitely be killed immediately. So they have to hide the body. But then
and to protect their beloved ones.
Exactly, yeah, because then it becomes not just about themselves, but also about their friends and their family.
It will be a bloody vendetta.
Exactly. And so as they tried to hide the crime, they got discovered, but then they tried to hide another crime. And then before they realized it, just in their attempt to hide one crime after the other, they found themselves in the middle of the sort of like a resistance movement in Busada against the French army. And so the whole novel is about them at the beginning coming to Busada, trying to navigate trying to make a career. But also one part is about them trying to hide the crime, but then also finding themselves in the middle of that resistance against the French army.
That's great. It's great imagination. Did you go to Busada?
Yes, but honestly, I went to Busada after I finished at least the first draft, which was good because I did a lot of research, from old archives,
exactly.
Like seeing the map, pictures.
You used the old archives.
Exactly, and then so I was able to really imagine, the streets, what they were like, the houses, because I think when I visited Busada afterwards, I would have probably had a different image because I see it from a modern point of view. There's a lot of parts that are preserved, like they were in the past. But I feel like it was better that I was able to see pictures and sort of like maps and archives that were very helpful.
And why didn't you follow your publication dreams until recently?
I think for a very long time I didn't think it was worth publication. I think most of the time I just wrote for myself and just enjoyed telling stories. But then also I think when I tried, talking like maybe 2016, 2017, I realized how difficult it is to get, especially a book published in English. I think in Algeria, there isn't a lot of capacity to edit English books. Most of the books are, in English and in Arabic or French, which is understandable. In the English-speaking world, like in the UK or the US, it's a very competitive world. And so they say, maybe 1% or maybe 10% of the writers ever get published because it's a very competitive process.
Yes. There are a lot of writers.
Exactly, and there are a lot of really good writers, and there are really good stories, and so and then there's a whole different process. You have to go through an agent, and then the agent would have to get you a publisher. So I was trying to navigate the whole process, and then I realized at one point my book was too long. Nobody's going to take as a first time author, nobody's going to take a book that long. So I worked on making it a little bit shorter, and then I started sort of participating in competitions and trying to sort of submit it to places where I could get it published.
And then you will be published soon after taking part to a contest.
Exactly, the Island Prize.
The Island Prize.
Yes.
So tell us everything about this prize. What are the conditions to participate?
Of course. So the Island Prize is a prize for unpublished writers from Africa, any part of Africa. And so I participated in the first edition 2021-2022. And so this was started by a South African writer called Karen Jennings. After her book, The Island, so she started this initiative and the objective is really to help unpublished authors like myself to really get a chance and opportunity at publication in English language world, because the publisher and the organizers of the competition, they know how difficult it is for people to make it in the publication industry, in the publishing industry. And so I submitted my application, I think around November, December 2021. And so at the beginning of this year, I was very happy. I wasn't expecting much, but I was really happy when I was longlisted, and that was already really good news, and I already felt like a winner because I started receiving a lot of support from the publisher, from writers, the judges who were there. I was promised also feedback, and that was also very exciting for me. And then really the good surprise is when I was shortlisted, I was on the shortlist. I was like the third place in the competition.
Being in the first long list is like winning the first battle.
Exactly. I already felt like a winner being, in the long list. But then being in the short list was, I think, a whole different achievement, which I was really happy because, again, at that point, I was able to work with the publisher and editor to sort of, work on my novel to make it a little bit more sort of ready for publication.
It's when you're in the shortlist that you start believing hard that you may win, you can win, and you tell yourself, yes, I deserve to win.
Exactly, and then you said, I feel like, the most exciting part was like, when you know that, there's writers like Karen Jennings or other writers from Africa who read and enjoyed your novel, and at the same time it's intimidating, but you go like, oh my God, they really liked it. So it was really, I think, really good feeling to have. And then so after that, the organizers of the competition, they were helping the writers, to get agents or to get a publication offer. And like I said, I'm working with UK publisher Holland House to sort of prepare the book for publication next year. But also very exciting news is we were also able to start, now the competition is open for new authors, and then we were able to start a category just for, writers from North Africa, from the Maghreb region. And also just because of, I think there weren't a lot of submissions from this region, and also, trying, especially now there's a little bit more of tendency to go towards English. And there is a lot of Algerian writers, but also like Tunisian, Moroccan, and the rest of the Maghreb region who write in English, and so we want to sort of give them the chance to, to get their stories told.
All right, and there's a lot of talent in Africa.
Definitely, yeah.
For example, not only from North Africa, but Central and South Africa.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of really good books that come out of, like South Africa, but also Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania. I think, there
are beautiful local stories that deserve to be discovered.
Yeah, and I think at the university we used to also, there was the whole module for African literature, which I used to really enjoy because, there was these famous books by Chinua Achebe, but other ones from the rest of Africa. But then as I read more, I was able to discover Chimamanda Ngozi, who's now world famous. She has really amazing novels around the world, and she tells stories of Nigerians, but also Nigerians abroad. And it's really good, I think, to get to know other parts of Africa.
Yes. And there are also stories that have been stolen by foreigners.
Stolen,
they made songs from these stories, novels, books. How can we protect our, let's say, hair?
Well, I think in a way, I feel like, as long as it's ethical, I feel like in a way, it's good that, these stories are getting told abroad, because I feel like, we're always receiving stories from other parts of the world. So it's really good to be, exporting those stories, as long as it's done the right way. But I feel like one way to really protect that is really to explore it and really to sort of tell it yourself. So the idea is like the best way, if you don't want other people to tell your story, you need to tell it and you need to tell the world about it. And so I feel like, again, for example, we'll go back to, publishing a book in English or translating your book into English version, that would, assure maybe a little bit more of widespread in other parts of the world that don't necessarily read Arabic or French. But I feel like, again, the whole point is, I think you can't really protect it and keep it yourself. You want to tell it so that you're in control of the narrative, if you know what I mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our African writers deserve more chances.
I think everybody deserves more chances, and I feel like definitely the publishing industry is nascent at best in Africa because I feel like, compared to other parts of the world where it's really developed, there's a huge market for it. And I think in Africa we're seeing, different parts. I think Algeria is one of them, but also...
Yeah, when I say African writers, I really mean Algerian writers.
Yeah.
For example, when we see in the past that a writer like Mohammed Deeb or Assia Jabbar or Katib Yassin didn't win the Nobel Prize, we can say that it's a shame.
Correct, yeah.
They really deserved it, according to specialists.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult to argue, with that, but I feel like definitely there were amazing writers and that deserved a lot of recognition. And to me, I feel like, I don't know if you ask Mohammed Deeb, I don't know if he would want the Nobel Prize, but I feel like, any recognition is good, but I feel like more importantly is, getting more people to know about your stories and,
Exactly.
I feel like that's a lot more rewarding than a prize. But definitely I agree with you. I think Algerian writers do deserve a lot more recognition.
And making those writers more famous is like the role of an education system.
Yes, I think especially in a country like Algeria, I feel like there is a lot of readership, but I think there is a lot more that can be done in terms of getting more youth to be interested in reading. Also literacy in general. So I feel like that could be one way to get more people interested in our stories, but also like making sure those stories are accessible to the youth. So I feel like writing them in language that that people are interested in reading. Telling stories that they can identify with, as opposed to, I feel like if you tell them a story about a character that they can see themselves in, then they go, yeah, I can go with this character on a journey, and then I can discover more about my country through that.
And discover more about themselves.
Exactly, yeah.
And also we have to fix the problems of publishing and re-editing. For example, there are books that have been edited in the 90s or 80s, and that not available anymore nowadays.
Yeah, and that's a shame because I feel like I was looking for actually a novel from the 1930s by Etienne Dini and another Algerian writer about the Oulad Nail dancers in Boussaada, and I couldn't find the copy anywhere. I'm sure there's copies maybe in some libraries, but I feel like it's a shame that these were books that were not revisited because
I spent my life looking for a book, for example, Tahar Jaoud, Le Dernier été de la Raison.
Yeah,
couldn't find it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, and like I said, it's a shame because I feel like now today's world, it's supposed to be easy.
But people are working on that problem to fix it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I see a lot of new publishers. I think young professionals going into the business, and they're with fresh minds. They're trying to sort of make improvements to the business, but I feel like there's a lot more to it. Like for example, online, online purchases or online payment would have been a really good solution to, for example, especially on-demand books. If you want to, maybe only Yasin wants to read that Tahar Jaoud book, or maybe just Hamza wants to read this book by Etienne Dini.
Yes.
So the publisher does not have to publish 1,000 copies or 10,000 copies, but then they can sort of like do an on-demand version, and that makes things a lot more accessible, and that way you're working on it.
Hamza, thank you for being with us and for sharing your experience and your informations with us. I'm looking forward to read your book, really.
Thank you so much.
Send me a copy when it's published.
Definitely, you got it.
So, dear viewers, thank you for being with us. Thank you for watching us. Next time, we will discover other beautiful minds, other young talents. Stay tuned.